Have you ever looked at the men around you, men who seem to have it all? Success, status, families, and yet felt an emptiness beneath their polished surface. They wear suits, run companies, raise children, and still something vital seems missing. Carl Jung, the visionary depth psychologist, noticed this long ago. Many men never fully grow into themselves. They remain psychological adolescents, stuck in a half-formed state, performing adulthood instead of living it. Maybe you felt it too. That quiet void behind your achievements, a subtle but persistent whisper that says, "This isn't it." Something's still missing. This has nothing to do with how strong you are or how much you've accomplished. Jung saw something deeper, that real manhood isn't achieved through status or physical dominance, but through an inner transformation. It's a psychological and spiritual journey, one that few men dare to take. It means facing your inner shadow, embracing the contradictions within you, and discovering what Jung called the self, the totality of who you truly are. Sadly, modern society has severed men from the sacred rites that once guided them through this process. We've replaced those initiations with empty checklists, jobs, degrees, promotions, possessions. But these outer markers mean nothing without inner change. We're left with grown males who never became whole men, emotionally fragmented, spiritually lost. They wear success like armor, but inside they are boys, insecure, validation-seeking, and terrified of intimacy. They dominate or submit, never truly relating. These aren't just personal issues. Jung saw them as collective symptoms of a deeper crisis, the failure of masculine maturation. And you? You might be successful, even admired, and yet haunted by something you can't quite name. The truth is, many men today are comfortable living on the surface. They play roles, recite lines, but rarely connect with their own souls. They are, in Jung's words, not men, but boys dressed as men. This journey we're about to begin is about confronting those illusions and excavating your authentic self. It's not about becoming some macho ideal. It's not about being an alpha male. It's about becoming real, integrated, conscious, fully alive. It's about remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. So ask yourself now, are you ready to begin that journey? Take a deep breath. But know this, what lies ahead may shake the foundations you've built your identity on. The path to true masculinity demands courage, not comfort. It asks you to face the parts of yourself you've buried. Because only by meeting yourself fully, without the mask, can you become what Jung called a whole man. The first obstacle, the persona. That social mask every man wears to be accepted, to belong. Jung wrote that the persona is not who you are, but who you and others believe you are. It's the professional face you show in meetings, the provider identity you perform at home, the curated image on your social media. The danger comes when you mistake the mask for your real face, when you believe you are your title, your success, your role. And when that happens, you become what Jung called the hollow man, impressive on the outside, vacant within. Look closely at the men around you. How many are embodying manhood, and how many are merely performing it? How many have become so entangled in their roles that nothing authentic remains? These are the men bound by persona, rigid, appearance-obsessed, emotionally distant. They say what's expected, do what tradition dictates, and run from their own vulnerability. They may appear powerful, but it's a brittle strength, fragile, defensive, disconnected from the soul. If any of this feels uncomfortably familiar, pause. Reflect. Do you feel safe only when you follow the script of what a good man should be? Do you fear what you might uncover if you broke free from that script? Jung observed that many men spend their lives hiding behind their personas, terrified of what they might find underneath. But until you peel off the mask, until you stop performing and start being, you remain an actor in someone else's play. The first step to becoming an authentic man is to recognize this mask for what it is. Useful, yes, but never the whole truth of who you are. But still, something essential remains incomplete. As Jung once said, a man can become completely the persona, but only at the cost of his true individuality. The danger lies in mistaking the role for the soul. Until a man can look in the mirror and see the difference between who he truly is and who he pretends to be, His masculine development remains stunted, trapped in mimicry. Beneath the polished smile of the successful man, beneath the well-tailored suits and social scripts, lies a buried truth. Jung called it the shadow, a collection of all you've rejected, all you've been told not to be. The shameful, the soft, the broken, the wild. These parts don't die. They wait. Hidden in the depths of the unconscious, they gather energy through neglect. And one day, when the mask slips, they emerge. Not to destroy you, but to be seen. For the shadow, Jung wrote, is not merely a dark corner of the mind, it is a moral task, a reckoning, a mirror held to the soul. A man who refuses this encounter remains fractured, cut off from the very power that could make him whole. The shadow is not just a psychological inconvenience, it is a profound moral problem, a challenge to the ego, a crisis for the identity that clings to being good, strong, in control. The modern image of manhood has become a prison, forcing men to amputate their vulnerability, their uncertainty, their tenderness, their need. These parts are labeled weak, unmanly, and buried alive. But what is buried does not stay buried. Repression turns warmth into rage, sensitivity into shame, dependence into a craving for domination. The man who cannot admit his own fear becomes dangerously brittle. The man who denies his need for connection becomes cold, manipulative, isolated. And so the shadow returns, not as insight, but as sabotage. In moods you can't explain, in rage that doesn't fit the moment, in relationships that mysteriously fall apart. The self you've disowned takes on a life of its own, acting out from the basement of your mind. Until you face the shadow, you are not whole. You are at war with yourself, and this war has no winners. What you reject in yourself begins to control you. A man who cannot embrace his inner child will forever be haunted by his emotional immaturity. The one who disowns his weakness will become tyrannized by his need to dominate. The more you repress, the more the unconscious rebels. This is why so many strong men are secretly fragile, why the confident leader crumbles when plans fall apart, or the stoic father erupts over a small mistake. Their strength is a shell, not a structure. Integration is absent, and so during moments of stress or vulnerability, the parts of themselves they tried to exile come back with vengeance. These are not random failures. They are the unconscious screaming for attention, for healing. As Jung saw it, the psyche doesn't want perfection. It wants wholeness. Until the shadow is seen, felt, spoken, and owned, it will continue to emerge, not as wisdom, but as wreckage. A man who denies his shadow becomes rigid, brittle, defensive. His world is black and white. He clings to moral certainty, often condemning others for the very flaws he cannot face in himself. You will know him by his judgments, sharp, relentless, always aimed outward. But his real fear is internal. He cannot tolerate ambiguity in others or in himself. He lives in a fortress of false strength, untouched, unbent, but deeply alone. Jung wrote that the shadow is a narrow door, a tight passage that every soul must enter to descend into the deep well of self, and no one escapes its constriction. There is no authentic manhood without this painful descent, but those who make it through find something the persona can never offer: rootedness, peace, presence. The strength that comes not from pretending, but from embracing all that you are, the light and the dark, the polished and the primal. This is where true masculine power is born, not in domination, but in depth. To reclaim the shadow is to reclaim the parts of yourself that still carry vital energy, the instincts, emotions, and capacities that were once judged, feared, or suppressed. You do not act them out unconsciously. You integrate them consciously, compassionately. You bring your rage to the fire of awareness. You sit with your grief without needing to fix it. You feel your need for tenderness without shame. And through this slow, difficult, beautiful work, you become whole. Jung believed that no man could access his full masculine potential without this integration. Persona-based strength is shallow. It impresses the world but leaves the soul untouched. Real power, real presence, rises from within, from the union of all your parts. But this journey doesn't end with shadow work. It goes deeper. because at the very root of masculine wounding lies what Jung called the mother complex, the invisible tether that binds many men to perpetual adolescence. The mother complex is not about your literal mother, it's about the archetypal feminine, how you relate to softness, nurturance, the emotional realm. Jung observed that many men never psychologically separate from this feminine energy. They are either enmeshed with it or in constant rebellion against it. But in both cases, they remain defined by it, not by their own inner authority. The complex expresses itself in two primary ways. First, the eternal boy, the pure eternus, who avoids responsibility, shuns limitation, and clings to freedom like a child. He is charming, adventurous, but afraid of depth. Second, the mother-bound man, dutiful, compliant, but emotionally fused with feminine expectation. He may be dependable on the outside, but has no sovereign self within. These men don't stand from inner center. They react to women, to life, to their own unclaimed power. And both remain arrested, psychologically stuck, boys in adult bodies. The eternal boy resists structure, commitment, and maturation. He seeks novelty over depth, flirts with potential, but never roots into purpose. He may seem wild and free, but underneath is fear. The fear of responsibility, the fear of failure, the fear of becoming. He refuses the masculine path, not because it lacks value, but because it requires sacrifice. The mother-bound man, in contrast, appears stable, but he is tethered. Not to truth, but to expectation. He tries to please, to perform, to avoid disapproval. He defines himself in relation to women, not in relation to his own soul. And so he projects. He idealizes or resents, but he does not relate. He cannot see the woman as she is, only as the mother he longs for or rebels against. Both patterns block authentic masculinity. Both must be transcended through conscious individuation, the claiming of the masculine self from the ruins of archetypal confusion. No man can become a complete human being, Jung wrote, without a right relationship to the feminine within. This relationship must evolve, from childhood dependency to adult integration. The mother complex locks men in a state of psychological immaturity. They either avoid responsibility or become consumed by it, never finding inner authority. To break free, a man must meet his own inner feminine, what Jung called the anima. This is not about women, it is about your capacity to feel, to listen, to love, to relate. These are not feminine weaknesses, they are human powers. Until a man claims them as his own, he remains driven by unconscious scripts, always reacting, never choosing. The path to manhood demands separation from both literal and symbolic mother figures. Not to reject the feminine, but to encounter it differently. From autonomy, not dependence. From reverence, not rebellion. This is the paradox of becoming whole. You must separate in order to truly connect. True masculinity is not defined by domination over the feminine, nor by dependence on it, but by a conscious, respectful relationship with it. This includes the feminine in others and within yourself, receptivity, intuition, emotional depth. These are not threats to manhood, they are essential parts of it. Without them, a man is only half-formed, hard on the outside, hollow within. Jung believed that few men achieve this balance. Most remain in a state of reaction, either clinging to feminine approval or rejecting it entirely. But wholeness requires more. It requires the courage to feel, the discipline to stay present, the wisdom to hold paradox. You are not here to be the perfect son or the perfect rebel. You are here to be fully alive, to move from reaction to relationship, to stand in your masculine center and welcome the feminine, not as an enemy, not as a crutch, but as a sacred mirror. In ancient times, cultures understood that boys do not become men by accident. Masculinity was earned through initiation, through rituals that broke the boy's dependence and ushered him into a new identity. These rites were not symbolic games, they were psychological surgeries. Through pain, through trial, through the guidance of elder men, the boy was introduced to death. Not physical death, but the death of childhood identity. And on the other side of that death, something new could be born. Today we've lost these traditions. The modern world expects boys to become men without direction, without challenge, without recognition. We leave them stranded, full of potential, but empty of purpose. Chronological adults who carry the psyche of adolescence. They look grown, but inside the boy still waits. For a path, for a father, for a fire to walk through. Traditional initiation had a structure for soul transformation. It severed boys from maternal influence, not with cruelty, but with necessity. It introduced them to male mentors, masculine wisdom, and sacred limits. It asked them to face their fears, confront their smallness, and discover the depth of their being. Then it gave them recognition, not for performance, but for crossing the threshold. Without such a passage, men remain unclear. They move through life with titles, achievements, and possessions, but without rooted identity. They are adults by age, but not by soul. This lack of initiation leaves a psychological hole, and into that hole rushes confusion, addiction, projection, and despair. The boy consciousness lingers, afraid to be seen, afraid to stand, afraid to grow. The uninitiated man reveals himself in 1,000 subtle ways. He lacks boundaries, always adapting, always performing. He struggles with discipline because no inner father guides him. He needs constant validation through sex, success, or praise because his worth is unclaimed. He competes with other men, not from strength, but from insecurity. He either worships women or resents them, unable to see them clearly. His masculinity is uncertain, fragile, performative. And so he overcompensates through bravado, aggression, stoicism, or he disappears into passivity, fantasy, and self-doubt. But no matter the mask, the wound remains. The boy is still searching for something only the initiated man can give. When true initiation is missing, men reach for substitutes, pseudo-initiations that promise transformation but deliver trauma. They chase danger, flirt with self-destruction, drown in addiction, or consume women to feel alive. Others escape in safer ways: video games, pornography, endless self-help, anything to avoid the unbearable confrontation with their own soul. But the boy cannot become a man through escape. Jung knew this. Real transformation requires conscious suffering, sacred struggle. Today, men must create their own initiations. They must seek out mentors, embrace discomfort, study ancient masculine wisdom, and enter communities where masks are dropped and truth is spoken. Initiation is no longer given. It must be chosen. It is not a ceremony. It is a way of life. And without it, the wound continues. Jung wrote, "The greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of the parent." Uninitiated fathers pass on their confusion, their repression, their fears. Not by intention, but by absence. The cycle continues. Sons raised by incomplete men become incomplete men themselves. The only way out is through. A man must stop waiting for permission. He must turn inward, toward the place he fears most. He must descend into his shadow, his pain, his forgotten gifts. He must choose initiation, not once, but over and over again. Because the masculine path is not a destination, it is a practice, a becoming, a return to the deep truth of who you are beneath the mask, beyond the mother, beyond the fear. A man, whole, awake, alive, children. That's where it often begins. In the wonder of youth, the seeds of the psyche take root, not just in the personal memories we collect, but in something deeper, ancient echoes, what Jung called archetypes. These are not just ideas, but living templates woven into our very souls. They whisper through myths, dreams, and emotions. For men, 4 such forces form the backbone of masculine potential: the king, the warrior, the magician, and the lover. But in the modern world, these energies have been forgotten, misused, or buried beneath shallow stereotypes. Without them, masculinity fractures into either grandiosity or collapse. The king is not a tyrant, but a sacred steward. He brings order, not oppression. He blesses, he creates, he holds a center. But when the king is absent, men either dominate with insecurity or shrink from responsibility. Masculine power then becomes toxic or timid, never true. Jung knew that these archetypes were not fantasies, but blueprints for a man's wholeness. To ignore them is to remain fragmented. To reconnect with them is to remember the deep wisdom buried in the collective soul of manhood. The journey back begins with recognition and reverence. When a man is aligned with the king archetype, he does not seek to control, but to bless. He becomes the source of structure and safety, offering clarity of purpose and a sanctuary of presence. His leadership is not domination, it is generativity. He builds, sustains, nurtures. But when this energy is repressed or distorted, the results are disastrous. He may become a tyrant, rigid, narcissistic, obsessed with control. Or he may become a ghost of a man, retreating into passivity, afraid of power, incapable of taking up the mantle of responsibility. This is the modern crisis. Many men don't trust their own strength, and so they abandon it. But strength without love is tyranny, and love without strength is impotence. The king archetype asks more of us, to govern our inner world with wisdom and to serve the world outside with grace. Most men today stand either in exile from this throne or upon it with a crown too heavy for their hollow hearts. To return to this sacred center is to restore the heart of manhood, not by ruling others, but by ruling oneself. The warrior archetype steps forward next, sharp, alert, disciplined. He is the guardian of boundaries, the defender of what is sacred, the force that says no with conviction and yes, with full-hearted commitment. The true warrior does not act out of rage or impulse, but out of purpose. He knows that courage is not the absence of fear, but the mastery of it. Yet modern culture misunderstands him. He is either demonized as violent or worshipped as mindless force. In truth, the warrior is a servant of the soul. He acts not for glory, but for alignment. When disconnected, a man becomes a reckless aggressor, cutting without cause, or a fearful bystander, unable to act when it matters most. Jung saw this split. Men either burn with undirected fury or dissolve into paralysis. But when the warrior is awakened, he becomes an agent of clarity and strength. He protects his inner truth, defends what he loves, and honors the discipline of a life lived deliberately. Without him, a man remains aimless. With him, he becomes anchored in action and integrity. The magician emerges from the shadows, subtle, perceptive, and wise. He represents the power of consciousness, the light of insight, and the mystery of transformation. He is the seeker of truth, the master of symbols, the alchemist who turns pain into understanding. In a healthy man, the magician helps him reflect, question, and connect the dots no one else can see. But when this archetype is distorted, it manifests in two broken forms: the manipulative trickster who hides behind cleverness, and the naive dreamer lost in theory, disconnected from life. Our culture, obsessed with quick answers and shallow knowledge, leaves little room for deep knowing. So many men overthink but fail to understand. They analyze without awakening. Jung believed the magician must be honored, not for his cleverness, but for his vision. He does not seek attention, but transformation. He calls a man inward, to study, to witness, to reframe his wounds into wisdom. Without him, men become puppets of unconscious forces. With him, they become aware, sensitive to mystery, open to change, alive to the unseen threads that bind reality together. Then the lover, tender, passionate, alive. He is the archetype of connection, to beauty, to feeling, to the sacred pulse of life itself. The lover is the part of a man that aches, that yearns, that dances in the intimacy of emotion and sensual presence. He sees the divine in art, in nature, in touch, in another's eyes. But in the modern world, men are taught to fear this energy, to see it as weakness, or indulgence, or loss of control. So they suppress it, becoming emotionally numb, or they chase it desperately, becoming addicted to sensation. Neither is whole. The lover, when integrated, brings depth and richness. He does not devour life, he savors it. Without him, a man becomes a cold executor of tasks, successful perhaps, but starving inside. With him, life becomes vivid. Jung saw that without the lover, masculinity becomes sterile, functioning but not feeling. The balanced man welcomes this energy. He weeps, he laughs, he touches the world with reverence. To reclaim the lover is to return to the heart, Embedded deep within the collective unconscious lies a truth that Carl Jung uncovered, a truth that many men avoid their entire lives. Jung saw clearly why most men never truly grow up, never fully mature into the authentic masculine soul they were born to become. It is not because they are unwilling, but because the journey asks for more than our culture prepares them to give. This path toward real manhood has nothing to do with rigid roles or outdated gender scripts. It is not about domination, bravado, or surface-level success. The masculine journey, as Jung envisioned, is about integration, about becoming whole, not perfect, but fully oneself. And this journey, it is not for the faint-hearted. It requires courage, the kind that looks inward instead of outward. It requires commitment, not to an identity, but to a process. And often it demands guidance from elders, mentors, or archetypal patterns that call us forward from within the depths of the psyche. Jung outlined essential steps for this sacred transformation. First, recognize the persona. This is the mask you wear.